Big Fat Gay Podcast where we talk about the things that are weighing on our minds. I am Trevor Keyson. I'm a super chub. And it's a Zoom episode, baby.
Zoom! Zoom.
There's a 30-minute setup time. Everyone has to log in and out a couple times. But we're here.
We love it.
And it's I pointed out on our little prep call, this is kind of like on theme to be on Zoom for this episode.
True. That's
true.
Very much so. Hi, my name is Michael. I am a chaser, and I forgot what Trevor said about himself for the intro, so I'm just going to say I'm a long-distance relationship boy, and you'll see why soon.
He won't get in the room with you? What?
My name's Don Marshall. I'm a big chubby guy living in sunny Hollywood, and today I am a short distance guy.
Oh.
Because I have only walked 2 feet from my bed the entirety of today, so...
You lazy
Very
cunt.
short distance boy.
My name is Dan Oliverio. I'm an author, public speaker, and chubby chaser. And today I'm a going the distance boy because I have a lot of stuff stacked up on today.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
We got some mail, so let's do that. Michael, play that beautiful bean footage.
Mail bean?
I'm scared of Michael's bean footage.
I'm playing it right now. Okay, so we had a listener write in. They said, a question for the pod. I'm trans masculine, non-binary, and super fat. I'm lucky to have had a lot of amazing queer sex in my life with people accepting and excited about my body. The sex-positive spaces I have spent time in seem very different from the chub chaser community, though. I feel very drawn to the chub chaser community and am excited by the idea of people being excited by my fatness specifically. It sounds sexually liberating in a way that I'd like to experience. I'm curious if you think the chub chaser community would be welcoming to a sissy super fat chub. How would you recommend a trans chub look for a chaser? And it's worth noting, I did not spend much time on HRT and have very little hair. I know for a lot of bears, not having much hair is a deal breaker. Also signed, Real Fat Transy Pansy in New York. Well, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yes.
Yeah. So the my take is that there's definitely room for this, and room for you, and room for a lot of good, fun, sexy times. And I think just starting with like putting that on your profile, I
actually did some research into like the apps and gender inclusivity options. So I'll just kind of present what I found. So Chaseable and the other Grokio sites, they have multiple options and you can select multiple options. So like
The point is that you could actually mark it as an indicator and then people can search by that.
Yes, and also say that like I'm into, non-binary individuals and whatnot. Scruff, which I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about Scruff. I would say Scruff is inclusive, but not fat inclusive. They have options just like pronouns and gender identity, but their weight cap is 400, which like Grindr does a better job. I can't remember. Grindr has a higher weight cap, and you can actually customize your gender and pronouns. Like you can put in anything. Growler has an option. They have like different identities you can check for your profile. Trans is one of them. And they also have Super Chub as an option, which I feel like is always nice. It's not, you don't see that a lot. And then there's always the old guard. I think the still best like chub chaser specific site, Bigger City. They don't have any options, but you can put that in your bio.
If the person just put what they wrote us in the profile, I think that would handle it. I mean, there's a thing about people not reading profiles, but I think an edited version of this would serve very nicely.
And if you made your, username like Real Fat Trans Pansy, there you go.
Bang. That's it. That's it. Yeah.
And I'm sure
absolutely.
Having gone through some changes with your body at some point, being concerned about your lack of hair fitting in with any group might be on the forefront of your mind. But like, you know what? I ain't got any, and it's never run into a problem for me. So
yeah, not everybody is into hair. I wish that weren't the stereotype, because we kind of get lumped in with the bear community, which is frequently all about hair. But like, Chasers, I think we run the gamut. Like, I think there are plenty of chasers very much into the smooth look.
Absolutely.
I would say
I'm one of them.
Yeah, same.
I would say there are guys that say they're into bears, but exclusively date hairless super chubs.
Yes, that's very true. So friggin' true.
It's a way of kind of sidestepping the issue, and not really coming out straight out and saying, actually, no, I like fat men.
So much so that I actually have a section on this in my book. Bear is a better brand that people want to get behind than brand fat, and that doesn't need to be the case.
Yes.
Yeah. And it certainly doesn't mean that there aren't plenty of chasers out there that are not into bears whatsoever, that are very much into super fat chubs.
I mean, have you met me?
Well, I know. What's your name? Who are you? Where am I? What is this Zoom screen in front of me?
And there are bears that like have nothing to do with fat. Like that's also a thing. Like that's kind of, I mean, that's kind of scruff. That's why like I'm hesitant to suggest scruff, but it is more inclusive in terms of kind of gender identity, and it's like more nuanced there, but also they don't think anyone weighs more than 400 pounds. So
yeah, I think there are options though.
Yes.
And I think I'm very curious. I hope this listener, maybe you could follow up with your experiences, good or bad. Cause I kind of, I'd like to know how things go for you, but yeah, thanks for writing in, and we hope things go well for you, and feel free to check back in and let us know how it went.
Yeah.
yeah.
If you want a good space to talk about everything, right here, you are always welcome here.
So what do we got in the world of pop culture and media?
Well, it's that time of year again, apparently. Friday was World Obesity Day. Yay.
Yay.
And we had cake.
Yeah.
And I was very proud. This was the year I finally chose to come out as a fat person.
Oh.
Wait. No one seemed surprised. That's all I'm saying.
You're what?
So
have you ever tried not being fat?
Every day. So once again, I always feel the need to reiterate this, because for our listeners who are like on the outskirts of fat world, or just like, I don't know, not plugged into the more political aspects, obesity is a very loaded term. Some people censor it. I use it in contexts where it's presented, because I don't really want to have to censor it and then explain it every time. So in the New York Times on this World Obesity Day, there was a full page ad that started with, "To the editors, beginning this World Obesity Day, we're asking you to eliminate the word obese from the news." And I was like, oh my God. I like sat up and I'm like, oh my God, is this going to be a good thing? No. I'm not going to read you the whole thing. No.
So the writers of this, it's a letter to the editor, right? I mean, that's basically the form it takes.
Yeah.
So they're saying, please stop using the word obese as a descriptor for people. But that's okay. You can keep using the word obesity because that's a legitimate disease. And it's this, it's under the guise of person first language. So you are not an obese person, you are a person with obesity.
Also overweight.
That's the thrust. And overweight. Of course, you got to have overweight. Yeah.
With a person with overweight.
Exactly. That's actually what they want. They want a person with overweight, because
it literally says that.
It literally says that. So the thrust of this is, again, it's supposedly a person first language that emphasizes that you are a person suffering from this malady and that it is not your actual identity. And you can imagine this has upset a lot of fat people who are like, dude, I'm fucking fat. So, and also the behind the scenes message is because they talk about how talking about the obese or obese people further stigmatizes fat people. And so unfortunately, though, what they've created is this message that is, you shouldn't stigmatize fat people because of their body. We should recognize that they are diseased bodies, and we should treat them with our expensive medicines that they can buy.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems pretty misguided. It's signed by, well, we can't even see the full list of signatures from the screen cap, but it's a lot of medical professionals.
I wonder how many
somebody
of them
who
are
is
fat.
the CEO of the Obesity Society.
Yes.
Which
company
I didn't even
is
know
that?
was a thing.
Yeah, I'm sure it's
what-
owned by some company. I'm sure it's owned by
It's not exciting. I was excited. It's never good.
Fat people in hats and monocles.
Mm-hmm. I mean, all the reactions I saw was like at first it was excitement and then immediate disappointment, which I mean, I think fat people are used to at this point with pretty much everything.
Well, the point that Reagan Chastain makes, and she's a fat activist who really specializes in like the data-driven stuff and the medicine stuff. And she says there is absolutely impossible to remove the stigma of being fat while at the same time saying fat is always bad and we have to cure the problem. Because again, they're just substituting, as they always do, fat as a biomarker. And being fat is not a biomarker. Being fat is not the problem. There may be underlying problems, but guess what? Thin people get those problems too.
The comments are like the first one that I read as I was sort of scrolling down was, oh dear, they think they're helping, but they are just doubling down on pathologizing people.
Yeah.
And then somebody replied, I don't even think they think they're helping. I think they think they're making great careers for themselves.
Yeah, I agree with that statement 100%.
Well, I'm sure they think it's both.
Well, and
I mean, it was an ad. It was not actually a letter to the editor. It was an advertisement.
Oh, it was paid
written as
advertising.
Yeah, it was written as a letter, but it was an ad.
Gosh, I wonder where their funding came from.
I mean, someone pointed out they did research and that these people are all financially invested in weight loss companies.
Yes.
In various forms, or like medicine companies.
That's the thing. It is, if you're a medical company, if you're a pharmaceutical company, there is no money in stigmatizing the psychology of being fat. You have to stigmatize it as a disease that we can treat with these drugs.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, speaking of stigmatizing fat people, there was
no.
There was a great piece in Inverse.
By Sarah Stark.
Yes, by Sarah Stark, called "It's Time to Abolish the Fat Villain Trope." Which
I mean, loved this article.
Yes, we've talked a lot about. I mean, a lot about this because there is so much to discuss about this topic, and I shared this because it's a great read, and I think this is like one of those things where, like, listeners who like are trying to get friends and family and whatnot to like look at like issues and like fat people being stigmatized, like this is a great article to share because there's so many things where it pinpoints where like people can really analyze content they've seen.
Yeah.
My biggest takeaway from this was I didn't know that huts are supposed to be fast and blaster proof. And
from
like,
Star Wars.
Yeah.
The Jabba the Hutt.
I want to see that. I want to see them like fighting and like sliding around all fast and stuff.
I don't think that, I could be wrong, but I don't think that has ever been represented visually in either movies or cartoons. I think that might just be like part of a trivia page in like the encyclopedia that somebody thought was ironically funny and then just became canon. I could be wrong. If Star Wars nerds greater than I, correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, they're coming.
I seem to remember in the most recent cartoon, I think it was Bad Batch, they introduced a non-villain Hutt. But I don't remember what he did physically on the show, but I just remember it being a novelty. Like, wait, there's a fat person in Star Wars that isn't a villain.
Well, and you know, there are, as you say, there are Star Wars nerds far greater than I. I think Michael is one of them, as far as I'm concerned. But the Hutts, am I right? The Hutts are supposed to look like that. Like walruses are supposed to look like that, and Hutts are supposed to look like that. Like they're not like overfed. That's just what their body looks like.
Jabba,
right?
I think, is a fat Hutt, but the Hutts are, but he's like Hollywood fat Hutt. You know?
That is an odd sentiment.
I bow to your greater knowledge on this. That was masterful.
And you know, to tie in the whole like Predator aspect to it, it should be brought up. The only fat Twi'lek in the Star Wars universe is the dancer in Jabba's palace, and according to the backstory, he forced her to keep eating because he liked her plump.
Yeah, Star Wars is not has never been a great. But I think the point of the article is that it's not just Star Wars. There's a lot.
No, it's every piece of
many
media.
different properties.
Yeah.
And I think to Trevor's point about it being a good sort of place to send people who don't quite understand or maybe are like looking to get your point of view on these things, and it's kind of hard to summarize. The article is incredibly user friendly. It's really well designed. It's really clearly written and laid out. There's a lot of like headings and organization that keep you oriented, not just in a sea of different points that are being made, but in the story of the article. It's a really great place to point people to. And it also breaks down different points of view. For instance, I was actually thinking this because Ursula is the background image of the header at the top of the article. And I was thinking, well, but fat people love Ursula. And it is true that is a character they sort of love to hate, love to love. But her point addressing Ursula specifically is that it is still a character that becomes kind of a template for, the evil older fat woman who preys on the younger thin woman to gain her power. And so, we've sort of co-opted Ursula and taken her back as a character that is basically the best thing about a really good movie because she's so fun. But that doesn't mean the character herself is still, that until we get the Ursula standalone movie where we understand why she is who she is, and
But there's also a tug of war going on right now for the identity of Ursula, right? Like, so when they came out with their makeup line, the version of Ursula they advertised with it was a thin, shapely, sexy Ursula. When they came up with the Descendants series and they had the offspring and the next generation of all these characters, all the ones related to Ursula seem to be very thin and shapely from the pictures that my goddaughter have shown me. They're standing farther and farther back from Ursula, trying to make her sexy and appeal to younger girls with her. The harder we try and fight to make her our own. It's very frustrating to me.
Yeah.
But one thing I love about this article is it does point out something that I've always observed in all sort of minority representation in media. You have to go through a phase where you're the villain. And that's often one of the splashbacks of representation. With gay people, it was the predatory sexual predator. With fat people, it tends to be a more flouncy version that is like kind of horrifying to children, but not so terrifying to adults. That seems to be the way we're used. Baron Harkonnen, if anything, is the exception. But it's nice to know that other people are starting to recognize that we're in that phase, and let's freaking move past it.
Yeah. Also, Guy Branum is at the heart of a lot of this article.
A lot of great people. Dr. Sabrina Strings, author of Fearing the Black Body, which I think also, like, I like this because it puts in a lot. It puts in Guy Branum. It puts in Dr. Strings. It puts in just all these people that, like, I think non-fat people should be following. And I think it gives them really, like, it's very punchy and, like, showcasing all these people and their expertise. It's just it's amazing.
And I think it does credit to the article that it's not just like, oh, it's just this one author whining about how fat people are treated. No, this is a conversation that has been going on among many, many people for a very long time.
Yeah, very well aggregated. All right. Is it time?
It's time.
Time it be?
It's time.
Oh, man.
I don't have the music.
Play the music.
Okay, well, hold on. Everyone close your eyes and imagine it. And listener, we're willing it into your ears.
Willering it into your ears.
It's Fat Watch 2022.
I knew it.
And this week we're soaring into Singapore.
Yeah.
It's an article from Japan Today talking about how in Singapore, plus size actors are taking center stage. And I was fascinated by this. I don't know about anyone else.
Yeah. It's really cool because, I mean, it does a couple things. It's breaking down kind of the history of, I guess, like fat oppression in Singapore, and to the point of like making kids weigh in at school and forcing them to go to weight loss programs. As recently, I think that ended in 2007, and then the sort of aftershocks of that kind of a program, and then also juxtaposing that with now. The play, commissioned by Esplanade, Singapore's National Performing Arts Center, is about a fat woman who is dating and going through her life and her loves. And it sounds pretty cool because I guess the audience gets to there's some audience interaction where they get to pick which of her 10 potential suitors she goes out with. And that sounds fun. I don't know. It's interesting. It's sort of a kind of that Netflix choose your own adventure, but in play format. Ross Nasir, I'm sure I'm pronouncing her name wrong, but she is the star of the show.
And it's a musical.
Yes.
Yeah. And it just sounds awesome. And the fact that was sponsored, it wasn't just something she kind of had to come up with and run around and try and make it, get staged somewhere, I think shows a level of progress that you would want to see, especially from a place like that where they have had very recently some pretty oppressive programs against fat people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Singapore is no stranger to that. But I think it's another demonstration of, when you crack down on something in a draconian fashion, you spark pushback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely be curious to see the work. And I'd also be curious to see if it, the content, if it's comparable to the sort of things that we're seeing in the U.S. Or if there's, it exists in a different cultural space. What are the things that they have to push back on there? I'd be curious.
Yeah.
And the article also does broaden to other East Asian countries like Japan and South Korea. And it kind of shows the progress and the steps that those countries are making. It was kind of a weird perspective for me to read too, because they sort of compare it Western countries have it kind of framed it like Western countries have already been making strides with plus size models and advertising and other areas of media, and that the Eastern Asian countries are having to catch up. And I was like, really? Is that okay? I guess man, that feels kind of grim in a way. Are we the model? Because I don't feel like we're doing that good.
Yeah, we're doing better than some other people. That's how that is.
Man, well, we all float together.
We all float down here.
You float too. You'll float too.
Oh boy.
Let's float on to the next topic.
Yeah. So, Don, you said you had a quote, which I've been looking forward to since the beginning of the show.
I do. I was looking for a bit to tie into this, and one of the bits I ended up discarding was something around various quotes about our topic. But there was one quote by A.A. Milne, the writer of Winnie the Pooh, that I thought summed up this so nicely. And the quote is, "How lucky I am to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard." Right? So our topic today is long distance relationships. Do they work?
Oh boy.
How do you make them work? What are the troubles with making them work?
How long a distance are you talking about?
And we do have a resident expert on staff here at the Big Fat Gay Podcast.
Having spent most of my adult dating life in long distance relationships at this point.
God, that's really true, isn't it?
So, Michael, why do you prefer them?
I don't. But
end of episode.
Social media, Trevor. No, it's a function. I mean, we've talked about the idea of trying to find somebody in a community as niche as ours in your area is pretty unlikely. It's certainly possible, but wanting to sort of broaden your search for a really compatible person to areas of the world that you don't really have access to right away, but maybe you could fly to, maybe you could drive to, I think is Dan's experience. And for me, so I've had 2 long distance relationships that I'm willing to speak about, and both of them started, I would say, almost out of necessity, in the sense that I wasn't intending to get into a long distance relationship, but the connection developed in such a way that it was like, well, I can either throw this in the trash, or I can pursue this and try and see where it goes. And I think when you get to that point, like the first one, I was very much like, living month to month, did not have a whole lot of disposable income, working freelance in LA and kind of just trying to make ends meet. And that is really, really hard because you have to pay for your flights and there's a lot of costs involved. And so when the pandemic came around and I started dating my current boyfriend, Michael, doing a little better financially. And weirdly enough, the pandemic kind of created this space where, as long as you were super, super careful about how you traveled, it made it kind of easier to do long distance. We could visit for longer. We were both working from home.
Ah, I see.
So we may be on the verge of a new world where long distance relationships may actually become easier because of the changes we're seeing happening now.
I mean, something that I've said for a very long time is that local, people say, I want to date someone local. Local is any place you can get to. And for some people, that's 100 miles. For some people, that's 500 miles. And so for some people, that's 1,000 miles or whatever it is. My first date with Trevor was when I sent him a plane ticket to come out and visit from Chicago, which is 2,000 miles away.
I like that because maybe I'm more used to it. I mean, obviously I am, but there's a stigma I think that we haven't necessarily talked about with long distance relationships, which is, people hear long distance relationship and they just assume that it's not as serious. They assume that it's kind of, like, okay, but why would you do that? You could find somebody around you. And certainly people not in our community, like if I talk to kind of normies and they're like, oh, so why are you doing long distance? And they kind of like, when I hear that question, it kind of strikes, it kind of like raises the back of the hairs on the back of my neck. Cause it's like, I don't really feel like I had a choice here.
Yeah, but
I don't have the dating pool to pull from. Yeah.
I may be able to explain why. Via this anecdote, I was talking to an acquaintance online and I said, how are you doing? He said, oh man, I'm really bummed. I said, really? Why? What happened? He said, I was dating this guy and I went out to see him and we broke up. And I'm like, how? I felt like a bad friend because I didn't know you were dating anybody. And he said, yeah, we broke up the first time we met. They had actually they had considered themselves in a long distance relationship, though neither of them had ever been in the same room with the other. Oh. And I think that is true more than you or us or anybody realizes.
I would definitely say so. I think also it depends where, what circle you're in. Cause I know I don't know a better way to say this other than the nerd community.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of that, online relationships. I mean, when I was in college, I had a weird instance of where I would say I didn't have an online relationship. I had an online courtship with a chaser who lived in the same city as me, but he was at the time doing a semester abroad.
Oh, right.
And it was we started talking towards the end of his thing. And Don was talking about things changing. This was when, video chat was still kind of new. I mean, this was, we would Skype. Remember Skype?
Nope.
And, we would usually Skype when he was getting up and before I would go to bed. And then he came back and we hooked up as one of the first things he did when he got back into the country.
Nice.
But and then we started dating after that and we had really gotten to know each other online, but we lived in the same city. And it was just one of those weird, it was kind of online, but it wasn't.
I think what you're getting into, which is something that I would love to kind of illustrate the differences between in-person and online dating. But one of the biggest ones is that you are not the same person online as you are in person.
Yeah,
as much as you think that you might be, there's so many differences to communicating online, even through a video call, that you just can't be the same exact person as you are in quote unquote real life. And so getting enough time with somebody and maybe the right attitudes and a little bit of introspection to kind of cut through the presentation of yourself to get to the real you is really hard to do.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is completely true, because when you're doing, even if it's video chat, and I know I've had people tell me, no, we really know each other super well. We talk all the time for hours, almost every day via Skype or via Zoom. And I'm like, yeah, but you're meeting someone in the same circumstance. You're not experiencing them in a traffic jam. You're not experiencing them with their friends. You're not experiencing them at a restaurant. And it's just, people respond differently in different environments. And that's the relationship. It's all those tiny little things. I'm not saying they're monsters. I'm just saying that you have this very curated one-dimensional experience.
And I'll take it a step farther. For some types of people like myself, touch is such an important part of my communication, right? Not just romantically, but with friends, platonic people, family members. Physical contact is one of the ways I communicate. I find it very, very difficult to connect in a meaningful way when all I get is an image, right? I don't even get the full body language of the person I'm talking to over Zoom. So all relationships to me over Zoom feel like diet interactions, right? It's like, all of the bother of chewing, but none of the fun of the calories. So it's like,
I want to kind of present the other side of the online connection too, which is that you can develop a connection online that, like Dan was saying, it's very targeted. It's very controlled. You're in a controlled environment. You don't have a whole lot of, if any, outside stimulus to kind of test you.
And you've made time. You've specifically made time for the other person. They're not occurring in your normal daily life.
Yeah. There's very not as much incidental interaction, but you can curate very intensely connected experiences with that person. And one thing that always kind of got under my skin that it's taken me a long time to kind of understand is you get a lot of challenge over the quote unquote reality of your relationship. If you have a long distance relationship, like, well, that's just not real because it's not what's in person. And I think the distinction that it took me a long time to understand and not get offended by is that they are different. Being in person with somebody, dating in person, is definitely absolutely different. It is bigger, it is more complex, it is harder in certain ways, but it does not discount the connection that you have with somebody online. It is just a necessary addition. Not necessarily for everybody. Some people do stay in long-term, long-distance relationships, but that I think is highly, highly rare. Like, that is not what most people are looking for. But that can work if you like that. It's not to say that your connection with your significant other is not real or not worth anything. It's just that it will change once you're together, and it could change in a good way or a bad way or neither.
What do you think of this, Michael, since you have the most experience with this? Because you've maintained long distance relationships over the course of
years.
More years, I was going to say, yeah. And a couple of those, right? Over years. So here's my question. I would hypothesize, see if you would agree with this, that you can maintain a long distance relationship for months or even years, but there always has to be a plan that you're going to be together some way in some way.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. In fact, so my first long distance relationship lasted just over 4 years. And coming out of that, I had told myself very firmly, I'm not doing that again because it's really, really hard. It's really hard. It's straining. You feel immense amounts of stress. It's expensive. And it feels very difficult to be able to focus on the value of protecting and growing the relationship. And then fell right into a second long distance relationship about, 8 months later. And so I would say that you get, from my experience, you get about 6 months of like kind of goodwill grace period. You get 6 months of like, this is easy. It's the beginning of the relationship. You don't really have to deal with the actual strains and pressures of long distance. And in that time, the weirdest thing that happens for long distance, if you're doing it, what I would say is the way that will be future-proof, the way that Dan is suggesting, is that you have to talk about the future far sooner than you ever would if you were dating in person. Like within the first few weeks, maybe a couple months, you have to both understand what you both want long-term. You would never do that if you were dating somebody in person and you were just dating and you're just getting to know them and, however long it takes, you wouldn't bring up, are we going to move in together, within the first couple weeks or months. Like you'd sound crazy. But in long distance, if you don't have an understanding of where you both want to end up, you will start living in absolute uncertainty, and that will start to destroy the relationship. And I think the biggest key of that is, does either of us want to just stay long distance forever? Because like I said, some people want that. I would say it's very rare. And then 2, if that's not the case, where are we going to end up together? Is it going to be you moving to me moving to you, us moving to a third location? And that move represents so much change and commitment. It's basically like getting married. I mean, you are uprooting your life. You are completely changing your life to commit to the relationship. And that, again, is very different from being in person and dating within the same space.
Yeah, I mean, even if they're moving in with you, which was the case with me and Trevor, like, Trevor came from Chicago eventually, and, we were together here in Los Angeles, but that was still a big change for me. I was even bigger change for Trevor, of course, but I was still like, whoa, this is very different. This is not just a long-term guest,
Yeah. And I would say I've had a luxurious experience of it, because most of my visits, flying back and forth between the various places, have been pretty extended, at least a couple weeks. And then, like I said, over the pandemic, we've been able to do a month and a half, because we both work from home. And that has been incredibly luxurious. But some people, they only get to visit for a week or 2 at a time every 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
And then everything else is built on really just like Zoom and chats. And that sounds really hard to me.
Well, I mean, my experience, I was with a guy for about 6 years, and we lived 70 miles apart. So far enough that it's really inconvenient. Like, you can't just zip over and see them. So because of our lifestyles, he had dogs, he had his family there and a bunch of stuff. And also it was a great place to visit. I would go out to see him almost every weekend. It was rare that I didn't go out there for a weekend. The only time I would not is if, maybe we both had something going on that weekend, or maybe he would come into LA, but he didn't want to bring the dogs to LA because that was a mess and blah, blah, blah. So it was just logistically easier for me to go out and see him. And, he had a great place, so that wasn't a problem. What happened though, is that I completely lost touch with the LA theater scene, which was a problem because that was kind of my milieu. And I was directing plays, and I was writing plays, and it was very unplugging to take weekends outside the city, because, not a lot of theater happens on a Monday night. So it very much, while I certainly don't regret any of it, but it was definitely affected my career. And that was just 70 miles, just not being where I needed to be on the days I needed to be there.
So before I moved to LA, I had a thing that was starting with a guy, and it was the summer before my senior year of college. And I knew I don't think I knew if I was going to go to LA then or not, but I knew I was going to be leaving. Like, I was going to be graduating and I was going to be moving somewhere. And I really liked the guy, but I told him, I'm like, I don't want to start a relationship right now, because I know I'm going to be leaving the area, and I don't want to like be in a long distance relationship when I'm trying to start something new, and just have to try to maintain something that is tying me back to the city where I'm trying to leave.
It's hard to start a new life when you've got one foot in the old one. Absolutely.
And he was really gracious about it. And I feel like it was not the best situation. I feel like I was kind of like, I don't know, the villain in that, because like, he definitely had feels, and I was like, whatever. I have sympathy for people who like don't want to be in a long distance relationship, especially like when they're kind of in a transitionary stage of their life.
And don't know where they're going to end up.
Which is when it's most likely to happen too.
Like, there's just people where, I know people where it's like they're just, all of their primary, suitors or options for relationships live somewhere else, but like they're not going to move, and people don't want to move to them.
Yeah, that was the piece of advice I was going to throw out there. I was trying to think of advice that's not just generally relationship specific, but really just long distance specific. And one of them I would say is really think hard about starting a long distance relationship if you are not willing to be the one who moves. Like, if you really don't think you can ever do that, think hard about it, because the amount of pressure it puts on the other person to do that move, to be the one who uproots their life and leaves everything behind, is, I would say, extremely hard to handle in a relationship, and maybe even impossible if they have any kind of roots in their hometown or wherever it is that they live. Nowadays, like Don was saying, not everyone, a lot of people are working from home now, and I think it is a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
obviously work is not, yeah.
I also think it depends where the two people are. I mean, and maybe this is just being urban centric for me, but I think, and this is just me, like if I live in Los Angeles or New York or San Francisco, if I live in a major city and someone lives in a very small town, I have the prejudice that I don't think it's unreasonable for them to move to me. Now, if they don't want to, well, yeah, then they don't want to, and that's how that's going to go. Mm-hmm. But I don't think, I guess what I would do is I would question the idea that both people have to be willing to move. I think it can be enough that one person is willing to move.
I don't know. I just don't make someone move to like Mouse Paw, Kentucky.
That's what I'm saying.
I stand by what I said, because if there are people, like we are all city people, but if there are people who are very much not city people, and for instance, if that person from Mouse Paw, Kentucky is starting to strike up a connection with somebody in LA, and they know that they don't want to move to a big city because they really prefer rural life, they shouldn't be striking up connections with people in big cities like that. That
sure.
will be, yeah.
Well, I guess I would say it this way. A better way to say what I said is, I don't think it has to be true that both people have to be ready to move. I think just one person has to be ready to move. Mm-hmm. And it'll depend.
Sure.
And it'll depend on the destination, right?
But my point is that if you've already started talking, I would submit that few people are going to stand up and say, no, I won't do that move, knowing that the other person won't either, because that kills the relationship right there. And so the inclination is to feel like you have to say, yes, okay, well, I'll do the move. If you're not going to do the move, I'll do it. I can do it, and I'll swing it. And then eventually that tension will pull to the point of snapping.
Well, and that's true because you're not telling the truth. That's what's making it not there.
But I think if one person is intransigent from the start, the other person, it is their burden to either end the relationship right then and there or say that they'll move. And so my point is, if both of you aren't willing to give a little, you're going to run into, I would submit you're going to run into trouble down the line. If you end up waiting for any length of time. Now, if the move happens, 6 months after you start dating, it probably won't have been long enough for that tension to build anyway. But if you drag it out for a couple years or more, yeah, that could end it. That could get really bad eventually.
Sure. But to me, that's about communication, not about geography.
Yeah. But I mean, again, that counts in long distance in a way that it doesn't in person.
I mean, we could say that the communication standards, and like in non-monogamy and maybe also in long distance, communication becomes even more important.
100%. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I would also build on that and say the idea of having to, like Don was saying, like hit one of his love languages is touch. And if that is true of you and you're in a long distance relationship, you are being starved of one of the ways in which you feel love and connection with your significant other. And you have to have the introspection to understand that about yourself and say, this is something I need, and I understand that I can't get it. And like, we can understand this together. And so you're not just sitting there in misery wondering why you don't feel the way you want to feel when you're not actually together.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people who are long distance also decide, well, if we're only going to see each other a few times a year or whatever that is, or however often they seem, let's make this relationship non-monogamous so that, for example, someone can get the sense of touch in the off season, so to speak. And I think, as I say, now we're off to the races about non-monogamy, but I would say that is also an option that also figures into long distance relationships.
Yeah. And I also really want to step in there and to encourage, like, I don't want to equate touch with sex. That's not what I'm saying.
No, I get that.
At all.
You don't. Yeah.
Yeah. That's not.
But some people would have, let's say, a sexual need, and it's not going to be satisfied in 4 visits a year.
Yeah. I just don't want to define touch as sexuality. That is not at all.
I think also there's people that, like, in a long distance relationship, if someone cuddled with someone else, that could be a betrayal too.
Yes.
somewhat.
Yeah. Is cuddling cheating? Yeah, exactly.
I
Right.
think I could feel that way if that happened to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is a whole. This is a whole other.
Yeah,
That's
that's a
a
whole
can
other
of worms.
conversation.
Yeah.
I would say that it's in the same ways that it's, a discussion to be had if you're dating in person, similar, except probably from the long distance side of things. If one person is already inclined to be non-monogamous or has already had experience with it and the other person hasn't, that can also be a huge pitfall, because it might be assumed that because you're long distance that you should be non-monogamous. Like, some people equate those two, or at least assume that that is the more likely scenario to happen, and that can add an additional pressure to that discussion that you wouldn't necessarily have in person.
I would agree.
Well, a lot to unpack there. Maybe a topic to return to at some point.
Yeah, and maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I could always say more.
Well, and I'm curious what our listeners have to say.
Yeah, send us your experiences, your triumphs, I can't think of the opposite of triumphs.
Failures,
tragedies.
well,
There we go.
pitfalls, tragedies, pitfalls. Like, if you've had things that you feel like could have gone better, and you think you know why, or any stories like that. I feel like there's a lot of them out there just because it's so common in our community.
Do we have a tip for the day?
No tip, but it sounds like we have a bit.
We do. There was a slight miscommunication, though. We did long distance relations. The bit I wrote for, I misheard it. I thought it was relations at long distance. So we're actually going to be talking about astronauts and sex today. The relations you can have at the longest of all possible distances. So, astronauts and sex. One of the most obvious issues with sex in space is overcoming gravity. In order for couples to connect.
Sorry, overcoming.
In order for couples to connect, both physically and romantically, they'll need to be tethered either to a wall or to each other. This problem can be solved by employing bungee cords, straps, handles, or by donning a two-suit, a garment designed to facilitate intimacy in weightless environments. However, Harry Stein, a former NASA technician and author of the book Life in Space, has an alternative suggestion for how astronauts might go about getting down. What is it? 1. Adhesive lubricants.
Oh, God.
Oh,
no.
God, I hope not.
2. A curved double-headed dildo.
Okay.
3. Sonic speakers designed to thrust partners at each other in 0G.
Oh.
Or 4. Threesomes.
I say 4.
Where
Option 4.
where the third person holds the other two together. They are literally the glue they're literally the glue in the relationship.
It gives you more limbs to anchor yourself.
I'm going to say adhesive lubricant because I feel like Don is trying to mislead us by saying that. I think it's maybe not adhesive, but like.
Where's the trust,
sticky.
Trevor? Where's the trust?
I'm going with adhesive lubricant.
I mean,
Okay.
if you wait long enough, any water-based lubricant becomes adhesive. The
Yeah,
shit gets
eventually it
sticky.
just becomes sticky. Yeah.
I'm silicone all the way. Just because I'm going to go with the curved dildo.
For
Take
his
that.
and hers pleasure. And
I don't
keeping
even-
them close enough for other things to penetrate.
Yeah, I don't know how that's going to work for straight people, but whatever.
Exactly the same way it would work for gay people. And the correct answer is threesomes.
Yay. Am I going to win 3 weeks in a row?
Oh, my goodness.
Stay tuned, listener.
Harry Stein basically writes about him testing out his theories of weightless sex in a buoyancy tank and wrote that it was difficult but possible, adding it was made easier when a third person assisted by holding one of the others in place.
Oh, dear. I don't.
You know there's somebody into that.
I mean, yeah,
mean,
but that's also just seems.
I think it also answers the question, what does the third person do in a threesome?
In a weightless, yeah.
All right. Sex in space has an additional problem that you wouldn't think of down here on Earth. Which of these is one of them?
Oh.
1. Getting too wet. 2. Getting too hot. 3. Getting too sticky. Or 4. Space chafing.
I'm going to go for space chafing because I can imagine that there's a lot more movement to control because you're bouncing around.
I'm going to say space chafing too, because I don't think you can get fully naked when you do it. And so whatever things that you have attached to you would end up chafing in some way, or you would get pressed up against something in weird ways. I think that too.
All right.
I was also thinking space chafing just because I imagine you're never naked reason, but also just that, like, I don't know, from my own experiences with chafing, I imagine being in a weightless environment, there would be more of it because there's more stuff moving around.
Okay.
Okay.
So we've got 3 answers for space chafing. And the correct answer is getting too wet. The reality is when you sweat and you exude water in 0G, water will stick to you. So it tends to pool all over your body in strange ways, forcing astronauts in their day-to-day life to have to carry towels around with them to mop themselves up.
Well, Don, in space.
Because of all the constant sex they're having.
Don, in space, no one can hear you cream.
Oh.
Boo. You're welcome. You are so welcome, gentlemen.
Might have to make that the title. We'll see.
According to many people who've spent a length of time in space, it does something to your body. What do people in the know call it? 1.
In the know or in the nude?
Full star elbows. 2. A lunar lumpage. 3. Post-astro hiccups. Or 4. The space beauty treatment.
Oh, dear.
I think face beauty treatment because, space beauty treatment because you would get kind of a facelift from the weightlessness that when you're back on Earth, your face would fall again.
Okay. We got 1 for a beauty treatment.
That is so not what I was thinking that was. I was thinking of, the pooling effect that Don
and there's less
before.
sagging too. Like this sagging effect of like your different, extremities being sort of pulled down, which I think in weightlessness would actually look a little more, I maybe that's just my chaser brain working.
Well, no, when you've had sex with a super chub in a pool, yeah, I understand that. Okay, I'm gonna go with that too. That sounds hot.
Okay, we got 2 for the space beauty treatment. Trevor.
I want to go with false star elbows because I don't know what that is. So I'm hoping it's that so I can get an explanation.
All right. And the correct answer is space makes you more conventionally beautiful. It's known as the space beauty treatment.
I was
Without gravity, your hair has more body, your breasts don't sag, and more of your body fluid migrates to your head and plumps your crow's feet.
Guys, I'm gonna have a 3-episode winning streak. This is unprecedented.
All right.
But can you? Well, I guess you can't explain Trevor's because it's not right.
It's fake. He made it up.
Okay, so the final answer is worth 4 points. So any of you can still take the win from Michael.
Worth 4 points. Hold on a second. Wait a second.
Ready? A flight surgeon had concerns about Apollo's astronauts' prostate health. What did he recommend they do to ward off prostate infections? 1. Drink Tang breakfast drink. 2. I am making the air quotation mark, self-stimulate. 3. Avoid bowel movements while in space. Or 4. Perform regular digital rectal checks on each other.
I want to say digital rectal checks because
I don't understand why he's concerned about their prostate in space. I'm going to say self-stimulation.
In space.
I'm going to go with the regular stimulation. They got to jack off.
Self-stimulation. All right. We got them fingering each other. We got them whacking off. Michael, what do you think they did?
To be fingering each other.
I'm going to go with regular rectal checks.
All right. We got 2 fingers. Got 2 fingers and 1 self-stimulate. Who has picked the correct dirty answer? And the correct answer is self-stimulation.
Yay!
Really?
Yep. Apparently they thought that would
do that in space because it would just be like
I knew my masturbation would win.
That's what towels are for. A flight surgeon once advised Apollo astronauts to self-stim to prevent prostate infections. Unsurprisingly, today's NASA has no official policy on orbital masturbation. But Russian cosmonaut Roach, interviewed, was willing to discuss the issue. My friends ask me, how are you making sex in space? I say, by hand.
Man.
So-
So we've tied. Dan and I have tied. How do we resolve this?
Next week.
Okay.
Next week. You'll have
Next
to
week is
break
the
tie.
chubbies.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Okay.
right.
We'll come back. We'll come back with the chubbies.
Oh, we'll have a death match some other time.
Okay. Chubby death match.
So, dear listeners, what issues have you had having sex in space? Where could they tell us, Trevor?
Well, Don, we're on Instagram and Twitter as @BigFatGayPod. We're on Facebook as the Big Fat Gay Podcast. Leave us 5 stars. 5 stars everywhere. We got some new reviews, which are nice.
Yeah.
I
And
listened to
Spotify
those on
is
Apple.
going up and up.
Yay.
Thank you.
On like written reviews on Apple, so keep sending those.
Oh, hell yeah. I got to check them out.
See the articles we talked about at www.bigfatgaypod.com.
Yay.
Maybe you're in space, the longest relationship distance you can be, and you're listening to us. We're touching you inside and out in your brain. And there's a knock at the space station door, and it's Michael, and he's here to digitally probe you. So.
That was me saying watch out in space, but you can't hear me because I'm in space. Watch out.